Is the reason that you're not handing these documents over about this abuse of power in this arm's length organization because you have something to hide?
What you're about to see is one of Justin Trudeau's Liberals lying on national television. I sincerely hope once this is all said and done, it's all blown up, we know all the scandals, every little hidden nook and cranny of how the Trudeau Liberals have been lying to us. This is used as evidence against her in a court of law because this is disgraceful, this is disgusting. Crap, she is saying on here what the Liberals are trying to pull against Canadians. Enough is enough, let's get into it. Welcome back to Moose and Lose. My name's David, and today's top stories, we've got Karina Gould and Vasi Capellos here. Vasi asks her the hard questions. Finally, she addresses the Liberal government of the SDTC scandal and asks her, do you got anything to hide? Do the Liberals have anything to hide from Canadians? And not only that, she asks it once, twice, 3 times. You can tell where this is going. Let's check it out. So the first half of this interview, we're not going to watch because she just asks her questions and she just says, oh, I can't talk. I negotiate in private. I won't talk about it publicly, blah, blah, blah. The situation here is the Bloc leader, Blanchette, has basically kind of made a fool out of Trudeau because Trudeau's last stronghold here are the older voters. He's already lost the young voters. They're not going to vote for him because, you know, houses are too expensive. And now he's basically forcing Trudeau to increase the old age security pension for 65 to 74-year-olds, which is Trudeau's last voting base. Trudeau voted against it. It's making Trudeau look bad to his voter base. And now we've got this. Vasi asks her about that. She doesn't say anything, so there's no point watching that. But this part here, she asks her about the scandal. She finally addresses the scandal. This is the first time I've seen mainstream media actually address the SDTC scandal. And, well, check it out.
I want to switch gears before I let you go and ask about another part of your portfolio as government House Leader, which is kind of what's happening in Parliament right now. It's pretty complicated. I'm not sure everyone is paying super close attention, but there's essentially an order that the House voted on for your government to hand over documents which would then go to the RCMP. The documents involve what's known as the Sustainable Development Technology Canada. It was an arm's length foundation. The Auditor General found a huge host of issues with it. It has since
What's interesting about this is she's having to look at her notes and stuff, where creators on here like myself, we've been talking about this for a while. There's no notes. You just rattle it off because this is like second nature. So I don't know if they weren't looking into this or they just said, oh, we can't talk about this right now. Trudeau doesn't want us to talk about this. I don't know what's going on, but it's just interesting that she's having to look at these notes on something that has been blowing up for days now, for a full week.
Folded and become part of something else. The Conservatives are saying essentially that your refusal to comply with this order is because you have something to hide in those documents. I know that you have contended and pointed to comments from the RCMP that they wouldn't necessarily even be able to access those documents as part of the reason why you oppose handing them over. Can you be clear with Canadians? Does your government have anything in these documents to hide?
That's the question.
Look, the point of all of this is that the Conservatives are using their extraordinary powers in
you're not answering,
to
Karina.
Try to go around the charter-protected rights of Canadians. This is the very first time, it's unprecedented, that parliamentarians are using their extraordinary powers to access documents, not for themselves, but to hand over to a third party.
This is not just a third party. She likes to word this in a way that makes it seem like they're handing over those documents to some guy who owns the bagel shop down the street. It's the RCMP for investigation, who've already stated they are investigating you guys, the Liberals, for your corruption. So let's not try to twist the words here. This woman is a snake.
And what the Speaker actually ruled was that, yes, Parliament has the power to do this, but he said very clearly that he wanted this referred to a House committee to actually study this because it's so unprecedented and it has the potential to violate the rights of Canadians. And so the Conservatives right now are actually obstructing their own obstruction in the House because they don't want this to go to committee, because if it goes to committee, there'll be a whole wide range of experts that come out and say this is an abuse of power, that Parliament shouldn't do this, even if they have the right to do it. And both the RCMP and the Auditor General both raised their extreme discomfort with this because it compromises the really important independence of the police from the legislature, and it compromises the independence of the Auditor General, who's an independent agent of Parliament. And even
this is a load of crap, and she knows it. This is a professional liar right here.
And more than that, it potentially violates the charter rights of Canadians, because anytime police want to access documents, they have to seek judicial oversight in order to suspend the rights of Canadians. And let's be very clear that the government...
Let's be very clear. With SNC-Lavalin, when that scandal came out, that should have been something that took down Justin Trudeau, but it didn't, because they used their system to protect themselves and not let those documents go to the RCMP. So Pierre Poilievre knew this time, no, we're just bypass all that stuff, send it straight to the RCMP, and there's nothing they can do about it. And they know that, and that's why they don't want this to happen, because they've got something to hide. Because really, if they didn't have something to hide, then they're like, sure, go ahead, send it to the RCMP. It's not like they're sending it to the guy who owns the bagel shop, like I said, down the street, or the local carpet salesman. They're sending it to the RCMP. If there's nothing to hide, by all means.
The government did hand over documents, but they were redacted because the government also has an obligation to protect the rights of Canadians. And that is something that, I would hope that even if the Conservatives were in power and this situation was reversed, that they would act in the same way, because that's what responsible governments do. They have an obligation to protect the rights of Canadians.
Vassie's not buying it. Her facial expression the entire time, she knows she's full of crap and she's about to call her on it.
I actually remember when the Conservatives didn't want to turn out over documents related to Afghan detainees, and it was the Liberals with other parties arguing that they should be made public. Ultimately, the conclusion was reached to send them to a committee. Is it your position that if that, and I take your point on that vote not being voted on yet,
no, but
are you going to vote in favor of sending to a committee?
Yes, we will. Absolutely. But it's not about...
Yeah, that's a committee that they'll control and not let the documents go past there.
Sending the documents to committee. And the Afghan detainee is actually different because it was documents for use by the parliamentary committee. Parliament has the right to request documents. That, we understand and we agree with. The difference here is that Parliament is requesting these documents not for its own use, but to send to the RCMP. And what the Speaker ruled was not that the government needs to send these documents right away. It was that this particular motion needs to be sent to Parliament, because to a committee, because even though Parliament has the right to do this, this is unprecedented in that it would violate the charter protected rights of Canadians.
No, you guys have violated the charter protected rights of Canadians. You are caught with $400 million, 182 conflict of interest in this scandal, and you don't want to hand over the documents. You guys should all be in jail for your crimes against us. Why are you still walking around free people? You should be in jail. You should be in work shackles, digging ditches and cleaning sewers out for what you've done to us and our country. You guys are a bunch of traitorous criminals.
So the Conservatives are spinning this one way, but they're not telling the whole truth. They're actually filibustering their own motion because they don't want the discussion of this unprecedented abuse of Parliament's powers to go.
Unprecedented amount of money being stolen. She is such a liar. She is Canada's biggest liar. Welcome, everyone. Canada's biggest liar right here, Karina Gould. Has she lied more than Justin Trudeau? Has she taken the throne? I don't know. She's pretty close. She is pretty close.
Go to committee because legal, judicial, police, parliamentary experts will come out and say this is unprecedented and this is not right. So they're actually filibustering their own motion right now because they don't want the truth to come out.
And I do note that the Speaker did, as you said, point to referring the matter itself to committee. He also did clearly say that your government did not fully comply with the order as it exists. I'll ask the first question I asked again. For the record, is the reason that you're not handing these documents over about this abuse of power in this arm's length organization because you have something to hide?
No, Vashi. As you started at the outset, the SDTC, the government, has fully complied with anything the RCMP or the Auditor General requests. But the fact of the matter is that both the Auditor General and the RCMP have stated that this is not an appropriate way to conduct investigations.
This is not an appropriate way to run a government by stealing our money and handing out contracts to your buddies like at the what's his name at Telesat Lightspeed with Mark Carney, Randy Balsano's PPE company, Stephen Guilbeault, on and on and on.
And they raised extreme discomfort with what the Conservatives are putting forward. And so the point here is that the Speaker did say there was a failure to comply with the motion, but he's actually referring the motion itself to committee because there's an issue about how appropriate it is for Parliament to use these powers, which they have, to circumvent the rights of Canadians. And so the matter at hand is actually not about SDTC itself, right? And you started off by saying that there were issues, and that's true, and that's why the government dealt with it. But the
government has not dealt with that. You guys are just the biggest liars. Bunch of thieves stealing money. You will pay for your crimes against us.
Issue is about how Conservative members of Parliament are trying to circumvent the charter rights of Canadians and judicial oversight by using their powers to hand over documents to the police. The RCMP has even said that it's highly unlikely that they would be able to use these documents.
Highly unlikely. Oh, yeah. This is just a load of crap.
Because of the inappropriate nature in which they would be.
Yeah, they also said they weren't investigating it at the time. And then 2 days ago, they said they were investigating it. I'm just asking point blank whether there is anything to hide. I take your point on your framing of what this is about.
Yeah. No, but that's what this is about, because this motion right now, so the Conservatives are trying to play a political game right now, but it's a very dangerous game they are playing, because they are trying to use their extraordinary powers for their own partisan pursuits. And I don't think any of your viewers want to live in a country where parliamentarians are directing police or the Auditor General for their own partisan gains.
You guys are already doing that. Justin Trudeau already controls the upper level of the RCMP. Canadians don't want a country where you, Karina Gould, are ever in government ever again, let alone all the other Liberals. You guys are terrible. You've been the worst thing in Canadian history for our country. There's like 30 people a day that take their lives because of you guys. How do you sleep at night when there's dozens of people who perish every night because things are so bad in this country? What is wrong with these people? They lack moral compass. They lack a heart. They practically lack everything except the ability to lie, cheat, and steal and scam Canadians out of their hard-earned tax dollars.
That is an extremely dangerous precedent that goes far beyond the appropriate use of our democratic tools in Canada and has never been done before. That's why the Speaker is referring this matter to committee, because it's now up to Parliament to decide how and whether they should follow this approach. Because I don't think any Canadian citizen, any Canadian organization, if they feel that they are the target of a partisan attack, would feel comfortable knowing that a majority in Parliament could then obtain their documents and send them to police without a search warrant, without getting judicial approval, without any guarantee to their charter rights. So from my perspective, this is a major issue that I think the alarm bells need to be rung by, because it is about, the trampling of the charter rights of Canadians. And
I'm sorry, did you say the trampling of charter rights? Do we need to remind people what happened just a couple years ago when the Liberals trampled Canadians' rights, quite literally their rights and their bodies? She has the audacity to talk about trampling when a woman with a walker was quite literally trampled by a horse by the police because they were trampling our rights. Karina Gould was a part of this. Justin Trudeau locked down bank accounts, took away people's rights, and she has the audacity to say this on national television. Appalling.
And there is a reason why the Conservatives are filibustering their own measure, because they don't want this to go to committee. Because when it goes to committee, legal experts, judicial experts, police experts, parliamentary procedure experts are going to come out and say, well, maybe Parliament has the right to do this, but there's a big question of whether they should.
Let's take a look at the comments here. Gould is a professional liar. It's disgusting watching her body language and mistruths. Something to notice, when she was asked the second time about whether they have something to hide, she pushed back in her chair. That's just a subtle thing that she didn't realize, but she's trying to get away from the question because they got something to hide. Unprecedented corruption in unprecedented times. Karina Gould is not worth the cost. She's a copy of JT. When Gould accused Vassy of putting words in her mouth, the Savage came out. Yeah, so that was earlier in the interview. Let's just show it real quick.
So you're okay with an opposition party setting an ultimatum like the one the Bloc has? Like that is something that you would use to guide your policy?
I don't think you should put words in my mouth, but what I will say is that opposition parties are free to say what they want to say.
You can see she does that fake smile. It's just a snake, this Machiavellian, slippery viper waiting to strike. Gould is likely to lose her seat next election. No, it's not even likely. It's like 100% chance. Like it's already showing it as conservative safe. It's like listening to a carbon copy of JT. I think she's lost her marbles. If anyone is aware or becomes aware of criminal action, as a Canadian citizen is obligated to report the crime and provide all the evidence to the authorities to be investigated. The absolute queen of non-answers, waste of oxygen fully and completely. Next up, we're jumping back over to CTV. Vasek Pelos has a panel here. They're talking about Justin Trudeau's really only options now, and that seems to be to prorogue the government, to delay, to wipe the slate clean, wipe all the bills off, and delay things. How long would he do that? Would he get support coming back? It's all about timing. Let's check it out.
It is not appropriate for an opposition day motion to set the precedent of getting a royal recommendation this way.
We were quite precise. We said at the very beginning of this that this is our position, this is our demands, and it will not change.
The Bloc Québécois continues to up the ante on Parliament Hill, as we've been talking about today. The party issued an ultimatum to the government that if they don't support two key Bloc priorities, by the end of the month, they'll work with opposition parties to bring the government down and force an election. This week, they tabled a motion on one of those priorities, boosting old age security by 10% for Canadians over 65. That boost already applies to pensioners 75 and over. Cabinet ministers and most Liberals voted against the motion, prompting Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet to dig in, saying if the Liberals don't change their position in a matter of days, he's going to start talking to opposition parties to bring them down right away. Sources around the Prime Minister told me this week after Mr. Blanchet said that a planned cabinet shuffle was put on hold and concern about a potential election in the PMO reached a, quote, fever pitch. Our Sunday strategy session is here to talk.
That's pretty interesting mentioning that. So they had a planned cabinet shuffle. You got to wonder, I got to think of Chrystia Freeland. I mean, she's basically disappeared into the background there. You don't really hear much from her anymore. Were they planning on tossing her out now? It's too much scandal to do that. Who knows?
Scott, talk strategy if you could for a moment. The Liberals decided to vote against this motion. It's, of course, non-binding. It was not a confidence motion. Minister Karina Gould, the government House leader, told me they're still open to discussions, but it feels like the Bloc doesn't think it's going to move.
No, I don't know why the Bloc would think the government's going to move, and I don't know why the government would move now that it decided to play its cards the way it did. So, I mean, it's a challenge for the government in the sense that it means there's only one rope left that they swing on to keep this parliament alive in terms of opposition partners. That's the NDP now. But I don't know how the two parties come together. And, you know, Blanchet knew where he was drawing the line. I thought it was sort of peculiar this week. He says, I'm drawing this line here. It's in ink. Don't dare try to cross it. Okay, you crossed it. I'm drawing it again and daring you not to cross it again. I think, you know, that debate's over. So I think you pretty much have to operate that you can't, on the assumption that you can't rely upon the Bloc if you're the government for the balance of this parliament. That's why
I mean, one other option Trudeau has is to give in to the Bloc's demands. Because if Justin Trudeau already knows he's going out, what would he care really about spending our money willy-nilly here, there, and everywhere? He's already doing that. I mean, they just gave $2 billion over to Telesat Lightspeed. What's another $3 billion over to the old age pension? I mean, it's clear after that interview that last week, Justin Trudeau cares about his kid voting for him. His kid, Xavier, turns 18 on October 18th. So the election has to be like the 20th, so 2 days later. So he has to get right to that end date. It seems that's what Justin Trudeau cares about, because he mentioned that when he was asked. So, I mean, that came first of mind.
I think we're probably headed toward a prorogation eventually.
Yeah, okay, that's my double-barreled question to you, Kathleen. It puts all the cards in the NDP's court at this point. What do you anticipate they do with that? And do you think the government should prorogue from a strategic perspective?
So I said last week, and I stand by it, I think the Bloc misfired completely on this motion. I think that New Democrats will try. It does take 3 opposition parties to topple the government, and I think that New Democrats will have lots of opportunities to try to seek things and use power when they have it to make life better for Canadians. They've always done that. They've done that for 100
years. What does that mean? Like,
so
what
that
are they going to
means
ask for?
We know that pharmacare has passed, so they want to get those deals done with the provinces. They want to move forward on some of the legislation. They could ask for other things like electoral reform. We don't know where they're going to go exactly.
No, they're not going to ask for electoral reform. I mean, last week on that interview with Nathan Erskine Smith, a Liberal, it's a Liberal podcast that had Trudeau on, they talked in great depth. I didn't put most of it on the channel, but they talked in great depth about electoral reform. And Justin Trudeau said that's one of the main things he wish he was able to do, but he's sad that, something that they didn't get done, and they decided not to do it. They talked very in depth about the different types, whatever, but Trudeau likes the ranked ballot system. So if you rank all the different parties in order, and then based on the order, it ranks it like that. He was very clear. They decided they're not going to be touching electoral reform. It's one of the promises, the Liberal promises that they broke. So there's no way, Jagmeet's going to come and ask for that. Jagmeet probably knows that. He knows that's not something to touch. I don't think Kathleen's up to date with what's going on in the interviews and stuff. That's not her daily job. So that's why she's saying that, but that's not going to happen.
Exactly right. I don't specifically know, but there are clear asks like getting those deals done, getting pharmacare actually concrete in the provinces so people feel it and get some relief in terms of those bills. But in terms of prorogation, I think it would be smart, frankly. I mean, I wouldn't want the government to do that, but I think if I was sitting in the Liberals camp, I would say to them, yeah, prorogue, get to October, prorogue, take a time out, start up in the new year and keep on going. And then hopefully, whether it's the economic situation, people's affordability crisis, people will be happier post-Christmas. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a Christmas surprise. Yeah.
She gives the stupidest advice every time she's on here. Canadians aren't thinking, oh, Justin Trudeau prorogued. What's that mean? Oh, it's Christmas. Oh, Christmas. So great. I completely forgot about all their scandals while I'm sitting here with outrageous heating bills and can't afford to live. That's not going to happen. Trudeau's going to lose a lot of support. That's what's going to happen if he prorogues the government. His numbers are going to get worse. And the only reason he would do that for his own benefit is to time it so then he can get support from Jagmeet for that juicy $2.3 million pension. That is the only way this is going to work. He'll get that support from Jagmeet coming back.
Just on that note, Shakir, this week, as I was saying, I interviewed the government House Leader. I asked her point blank about whether prorogation was on the table. She was actually very direct in saying, no, it wasn't. Many people contacted me after that and said, well, ultimately that's the Prime Minister's decision. So she may not be in the know and able to say that, but it doesn't mean that truly it's off the table for the Prime Minister. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think, listen, prorogation, it's going to save them and buy them some time. And I totally get that. But I feel the Liberals have this narrative that they put out there that they're the party that comes to Ottawa, that comes to Parliament, pushes for the business of Canadians, pushes for legislation, and all the opposition parties, they obviously point to the Conservatives. They're the ones playing political games. They're the ones that don't want to move things forward. I think prorogation flies directly in contrast to that narrative the Liberals are putting forward. And sure, they can do it to save their skin, but I think a lot of voters and a lot of Canadians will look at this scenario and wonder, why is the government not operating? Why are they not moving things forward? Why is this pause happening right now? Are you just trying to stay in power? And I think they'll be punished for that, to be quite frank with you. So I'm not sure it's a smart strategy. It is buying them some time, but I'm not sure it's a smart strategy in terms of winning favor with Canadians.
This guy's right on the money. That's what's going to happen. You'll see the current numbers, whatever numbers you want to go with whatever poll. 21% for the Liberals, 18%. Say you say 18% they prorogue, they probably come back and they'll be like 15, 13. It's going to drop to astronomical lows.
I feel like the calculation, Scott, is certainly, as Shakir pointed out, the basis of the contrast they've tried to paint with other parties, particularly the Conservatives and the Bloc, even to a degree, in the past few weeks has been, we're here working for Canadians, they're just playing politics. But when your livelihood is at stake, I feel like they're going to live with the consequence of the backlash from that rather than an immediate defeat if they went to an election.
Exactly. When you see somebody chiseling your name into a gravestone, it has a way of focusing the mind and perhaps changing the options available to your House Leader. Like, I hear what Shakir is saying. I don't remember the Harper government getting all high and mighty about how a prorogation would be a terrible thing and just delay the inevitable. But I do think for the Liberals, there's an added question, which is if you're going to be forced to move into a prorogation at some point, what do you use that time for? Is it just to delay the inevitable or to try to improve your fortunes? So if you're going to move to it, like, I think you bring in a fall economic statement, you invite a confidence vote, you put enough in there that the NDP do support it, then you call a prorogation on the basis of strength. And then, frankly, you have a real examination as to what you're going to do. Does the Prime Minister step down? You use that prorogation to have a leadership race. If he's not going to step down, how do you reorient your agenda completely? You're going to have to come to grips with the consumer carbon tax. So don't just call a prorogation and then go fishing. You're going to have to use that time if you're forced to take it to advance your fortunes in some way.
I don't often agree with Scott Reid here, but he's right. I mean, if they had a plan Just think if the Liberals did the prorogation comeback, they get rid of the carbon tax. They say, we know that you guys don't like the carbon tax, even though that was our policy. We're going to switch it to a policy that works better for you guys. You know, if they started switching things, they would get more support. Now, a bunch of us, we're never voting Liberal again, but they would trick some of the people who are not in the know here, not watching on here every day. They would just forget about the scandals, and they would actually get some support. But they're too arrogant to do that. It doesn't matter what they do, they're toast.
I think it would provide, though, Kathleen, the only opportunity the Liberals have between now and whenever the next election is to do that, to do all the stuff you guys have been talking about for months and put something, you know, substantial out there, whether it be a change in position on the carbon tax, a change in the leader, a tax cut, like a myriad of options, rather than the messaging that has been going on for the last 2 months, which is we're just going to keep on doing this.
Yeah, they have to use the time wisely. But let's remember, the Conservatives in 2008 prorogued the House in the middle of a global financial crisis. That was a serious time around the globe, and Harper didn't think twice about proroguing the Parliament. So I take some issue with Shakir.
But even then, there was a huge backlash from what I remember. I remember covering protests in Saskatoon when I worked in local media. It was the massive, you know, this is a threat to democracy, and it didn't ultimately punish him.
But the protests were actually built by the Conservative Party, who were actually rebelling against the fact that the Liberals and the Democrats at the time were trying to work together in a coalition. So they were actually anti-coalition at the time.
No, the protest I was covering was against prorogation. There were people who were upset at the anti-democratic nature of that. I'm just saying, and ultimately they weren't punished for it. So strategically,
no, they weren't punished. They weren't punished for it, even when it was in the middle of a financial crisis. I think the point that I would make is that it's weird to be a Conservative who, like, listen, we've had 14 sitting days as of today. Literally, they've gotten 2 days of government business done in those 14 days. Could you imagine going to work every day and just working, you know, like basically 20 minutes? That's what's happening in the House. But the Conservatives are stalling, blocking, obstructing, putting motion after motion. And then with no sense of irony whatsoever, House Leader Andrew Scheer will rise in the House and say, you know, we have to call an election because this government's getting nothing done. But they're in fact gumming up the wheels of, in fact, getting anything done in the House. So
there's too much corruption, Kathleen Monk. You know this. Come on. There's way too much corruption. That's why we need an election, not Conservatives gumming up the wheels. Canada's broken and is breaking. Soon we'll be past the point of no return.
Maybe for all of our sakes, they should go to an election just to move forward. But I do think that the Liberals will have an opportunity to point to the obstructionist nature of what the Conservatives are doing in the House, how they're not getting anything done. Listen, it is the Liberals' responsibility to manage the House and to execute on things. But right now, what's happening across the street is not a lot. And so maybe we'd be better with a reset and the reorientation that Scott mentioned.
I take the point, and certainly I think that I don't know, Shakir, if voters are looking as closely as we are at the degree to which stuff is actually getting done in Parliament Hill. I think the bigger liability, for the Conservatives is their vote on this block motion. It's totally misaligned with everything that they've talked about in the past 2 years about advancing the interests of younger generations and being fiscally responsible. That may be something that they're held to account to more. I'm not sure them being an obstructionist, quote unquote, opposition party is really going to fall at their feet in the future.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But I mean, even them voting in support of it, they're not the government in power, right? If this were to move forward, if the Liberals were to implement this, they're the ones who are going to have to put the policy in place, put the $16 billion on the table, and have this kind of be implemented as an actual policy. I think at the end of the day, for the Liberals, this is a bigger concern for them because they're the ones losing support amongst youth, right? We talk about this notion of generational fairness. I think if you look at that 18 to 34 cohort, their numbers are pretty abysmal right now. And it might be actually wise for them to, look at seniors and say, can we get to a point where we have targeted assistance for, low-income seniors and move forward in that direction? Because why not cut your losses and focus your attention on a group that reliably shows up on election day, as opposed to looking at a voting bloc that you're clearly not winning and not doing very well with. And I'm uncertain that, even with the passage of time or even prorogation, that group's going to come back to you. So hopefully, for the Liberals' sake, they can find a way to negotiate with the bloc or even have the support of the NDP, but do something for a voting bloc that they can count on to be there on E-Day.
Yeah, this guy's on point.
I feel like you're forecasting a bit of the future. I do think that they're going to come out with something that's more targeted. I don't know whether it will satisfy the bloc. I have to leave it on that out. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Basically, Justin Trudeau is on shaky ground here. He has to decide which way he wants to go. Does he want to try to get support from the bloc? He's hoping Jagmeet is his backup. So if he can get with the Bloc, then that's the double backup. That's what he wants, but he's got to make a deal. Does it look like he's going to make a deal? I don't think so. But then he's solely relying on Jagmeet to back him up. Now, Jagmeet, the pension, the whole thing, pharmacare, it seems like that's a pretty reliable backup for him. But to have all his eggs in Jagmeet's basket, I think Jagmeet waits until February and then calls the election, pulls the support and says he's the one who did it. Don't worry, guys, I got your pharmacare, I got your dental, and I'm calling the election because I want to be prime minister. I think that's what he's going to try to do. He's not going to get the support he thinks he's going to get. We all know Jagmeet's not going to be the next prime minister or ever be a prime minister of Canada.